we're going to continue this Insider series with Maik Jornitz, who is the President and CEO at GCon Manufacturing.
Good afternoon.
If you could just speak into your
Sure.
microphone, it's a little bit frustrating, but it works.
No problem.
Hey Mike, so I actually spoke with you several years back, and we talked about your prefabricated clean room pods. Can you just give me a refresh and just a quick overview of what these actually are?
Yeah, sure. Traditionally, clean rooms are built with either modular wall panels or epoxy-coated drywall, really. And they're fixed installed clean room systems. You build these clean rooms on site. You have a multitude of people being on site for months at end. So what you do is you build the site, you build the clean room infrastructure, then you start putting the process equipment into the infrastructure. So it's lengthy, takes time, and what we see as a need, and specifically when we talk about the cell and gene therapy market, we require to be very rapid nowadays with our facility implementation, but also with the facility design. So what we created is a prefabricated clean room system where we build the clean room off-site at our facility. We build either just a single clean room or an entire clean room cluster, which we, for example, just did for Avaxis, for the gene therapy side, or for Just Biotherapeutics in China. And what we do is we build it on-site. We do the FAT on-site at our site in Texas, and then we ship the clean room parts to the client, and we install the parts at the client site within 2 days, interconnect them, do the site acceptance test. And what we see with that is it creates a flexibility in regard to building, and it creates a much faster implementation of the clean room infrastructure. So the flexibility is there from a standpoint of what can I do with it in regard to location. So in some instances, we have some clients, they want to utilize these infrastructures at a different location for process development, for example, and then they say, okay, now I take them apart again and I ship them to an end site, or they want to repurpose them and reuse them for other applications. So they're not just for one product life cycle, but for multiple product life cycles.
They're almost like a pop-up clean room to some respect.
They are, yes. So a lot of times we hear trailer and container. We call them pods. It's not an acronym, we just call them clean room pods.
And I think the phrase podular has been coined around them.
Yes.
Are your pods, your podular clean rooms, are they different from the sort of spate of modular manufacturing suites that are kind of becoming more and more apparent in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, the word modular is used virtually for everything. It's very generic term. So a lot of people utilize the phrase modular for a multitude of different constructions and different scenarios. And so for me, it's like, the question for me is, what is modular? Is it a Lego block which I can put together into a system or into a facility or a clean room infrastructure, or is it, a wall panel, or is it just a design? They're even modular designs. So in one way or the other, what we start doing is we start differentiating our product as being prefabricated and being called pod, that we actually move it away a bit out of that modular array of terms. And so we started call it podular solutions in instances. And so to our clients, when they say they have a process and they would like to put this process and design this process into our pod systems, we say podification, or we podify your process. So which means we take the process and design the process into our pods. So yes, podular podification starts to be used by us more and more often.
And you've already mentioned Avexis, for example, in the cell and gene therapy space. But what other areas of the biomanufacturing space can your pods be used in, or are they being used in?
Right now, what we look at is the typical single-use bioprocess. So we delivered single-use bioprocess system of 500-liter scale, 2,000 liter, 4 times 2,000 liter. All these scales are available and can be podified. Then the cell and gene therapy, certainly in the cell therapy, where you really have to scale out in multiple different blocks. That can be easily done, and specifically due to the fact that we clone these type of systems, implement the parts into a process without even interrupting existing processes, because they typically have their tech space in the back of the pod. So that's what I would call the sweet spot. But interestingly enough, when we started with pods, our first major application was actually an oral solid dosage platform, which is the Pfizer Megapod in Groton. But I would say bioprocess, cell and gene therapy.
That's right. I was going to ask you about that, because I think when we spoke a few years ago, you just joined Gaia and Pfizer to look at continuous manufacturing for oral solid dosage.
Yeah, that's a continuous manufacturing platform, PCM&M. That was phase 1. We're actually working on phase 2 together with GSK also. So there's more progress on the oral solid dosage form side. But again, the major pull which we see right now when we analyze our conceptual layout basis is the cell and gene therapy side.
So can you take some of the success from that ongoing project to kind of use that in the large molecule setting on the fusion and continuous manufacturing and such?
Absolutely. And again, you talk about continuous manufacturing, continuous bioprocessing. I mean, we are not there yet. We see, very good trends within the process technology on continuous bioprocessing. And again, you go from 6-pack 15,000 liter bioreactors to now 2,000 liter bioreactors, single-use bioreactor systems, to another process intensification in continuous bioprocessing, which means you start shrinking your footprint more and more. The clean room infrastructure footprint becomes smaller and smaller, and therefore pods become much more amicable to that particular process.
And who really are your customers? I mean, with the Gaia and Pfizer projects, it's big pharma, it's Pfizer. But when we're looking at the biomanufacturing space, are we talking small biotechs, or are CMOs investing in your? Who's buying these?
It's through the board. It's actually it's a very good point. The CMOs also, because the CMOs, when they bring multiple clients into their clean room infrastructure, they need to make sure that there is a robust containment level. So we can VHP the pod structure also. So it can be rotated through a pod structure much faster, because it's easier to contain as well as sanitize. So it's the CMO side, it's the traditional large biotech companies who are interested in it. It's the startup biotech industry, and specifically even smaller biotech companies who would like to lease an infrastructure, because we lease them also. They lease them for 3 or 5 years without the risk into putting a large amount of capex into it, without knowing whether this will be a success, the target or not. So we give these type of options, and I would say across the board we can serve, and we serve actually most of these companies. And then again, the other part, what we see, what is on the rise, is compounding pharmacies, because the regulatory stringency on compounding pharmacies and fill finish systems becomes a higher burden. And so again, pods you can pre-install the fill line into the pod structure, you pre-qualify the fill line within the pod structure, and then you drop ship the pod structure with the fill line. So that's another field where we see a high rise in the pod demand.
So the regulators are really kind of behind this sort of technology?
Yes, very good question. So I mean, the company was founded in 2009. First thing what had to happen is we had to talk with the regulators and pressure test that concept. We got acceptance or a positive response by the regulators. Since then, multiple of the sites which we installed are actually getting through regulatory approval right now. And besides that, we are actually, our philosophy is an educated regulator is the best regulators. So therefore, what we do is we go to the regulators proactively and train on new technologies, not just on parts, but also on process technologies, on other clean room or facility infrastructures. So you have to train them. And then the other part, what we start training is turnkey facilities, because in our opinion, in future, we need to turn into turnkey facilities which we can copy and clone to start lowering the prices.
And I noticed recently you've inked a deal with Just Biotherapeutics in China.
Yeah, we did. We installed a site for Just Biotherapeutics in China, which was it's a BioProcess site, very unique system. We actually installed that, built the whole system within time frame and within budget, actually under budget, installed it in days, moved it in, qualified it. It's right now into the qualification engineering. It starts going into engineering runs. But also, there was one part, a BioProcess, which we did for Just Bio, which was designed according to Just Bio's needs. But we also worked together recently with IPS, an A&E firm, on a turnkey facility.
Just, I've got to kind of follow up on the Just Biotherapeutics, because there's a couple of other big projects in China specifically that have, not specifically with GCON, but have gone kind of the modular routes.
Yes.
What is it about China that is encouraging investment in modular or podular technologies?
I mean, number one, China is a growth market. And when you look at the growth within China and also the growth within facilities in China, the majority is still stick-built. I mean, still stick-built. But some of the companies realize the speed and flexibility of the build and therefore start looking into the different route. I think the adoption, what we see in regard to the adoption rate, is increasing much more rapidly to take man-hours off the site and to have the robust time frame when it comes to the build of the facility. And I think we see this trend also being realized in China. So I wouldn't say it's not just necessarily one region which starts that adoption, but we see that not only in North America, but also in Europe. And for that reason, we now expand into Europe and just signed a manufacturing agreement for a new site in Ireland.
But I suppose, once again, sticking with China, because our next speaker will be looking into Chinese biomanufacturing a little bit more. But for a country like China, which is huge but technically an emerging market and with new regulations, the speed of these modular and podular systems to go from nothing to having a facility that's able to make biotherapeutics, that must be a factor in why there are these investments there, yeah?
Yes. The speed is one part, but the other part is also, again, the copying. When you look at Greater China, it's a large area, and you need to have the coverage within that area. So what we see more and more is the in-country, for-country need of manufacturing. So when you do in-country, for-country manufacturing, what you want to do, you want to utilize a proven platform. So when you build a platform, you work with that platform, you designed it, you run your personnel within that platform. You now copy that platform and put it and build it into another area within China, for example. You could potentially train the staff of the new site in your existing site and then bring it also over to the new site. So you start copying, cloning, you start abbreviating the design phase, and you potentially start abbreviating your qualification phase and specifically also your training phase of your new personnel.
All excellent stuff. Mike, we're running out of time. I will once again see if there's anyone in the audience who has a question that they're burning to ask. But if not, it's, like I said, it's a pleasure talking to you once again. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.